My name is Josh Carney. I'm a structural engineer. I am the president of GPLA Structural Engineers. We are one of the DPR family of companies. We joined DPR 4 years ago. And so we're a bit of an unusual structural engineering firm. We're about 80 total employees, but half of those are not structural engineers. Half of those are structural detailers with expertise in detailing structural steel, miscellaneous metals, cold form steel, rebar, post-tensioning, and concrete modeling. And so very intentionally, GPLA has always been on this path of believing that design is more than just a set of contract documents, that if we don't understand design all the way through construction, we're not completing our job. So what does that mean? Within the family of companies, we have an opportunity to really leverage that, obviously. And we work not just for DPR, but we work for outside builders as well. But our focus is flow down efficiency, which I learned about just today. But it really is this idea that if design is not informed by the field, then it's not good design. And if it's not informed by the capabilities of the contractor, the capabilities of the fabricators available, it's not good design. So, you know, our answer to that has been this idea that it's very important to have the right people in-house. You know, so yes, I can reach out to a trade partner at a steel fabricator, but I also have my lead detailer with 40 years of steel detailing and fabrication experience. And I can reach out to, you know, a rebar fabricator and ask him about complexity of bends and a placer, or I can have people in-house that worked with rebar fabricators and placers and actually have lived it in the field and have experienced it. So it's very intentionally a focus on design being driven by the need of construction. Obviously, it's got to be safe. We don't want to have anything fall down, and we got to meet all the codes, but that's the bare minimum. That's just the ticket to get in the door to have a license. To really bring value, to really transform how the industry operates, we have to be so much more. So to be clear, talking about today, we're using a project that we did recently as sort of the focus of this talk. And I'm going to acknowledge a few things about it. First of all being this. We're still under a good bit of NDA on this. So I'm going to be a little bit vague. I'm going to try to be as less so as I can be, and I have some metrics at the end of the presentation that will give you a sense of scale and size. But this really hasn't hit the public radar yet in a way that we're allowed to talk entirely free about it. And I apologize for that. We were sort of hoping we would be able to show a little bit more, but we're not quite there yet. We're close. The other one is that this is an extreme use case. You know, this is an unusual project in the sense of it's very large scale, incredibly fast moving, no forgiveness whatsoever built into the need to deliver this project on the timeline in the way that it was done. And so in that crucible of a project like that, you do things that you might not otherwise do or you might not otherwise be able to do. And so I'm acknowledging that on some level this is an extreme use case, but what I will say is that this process that I'm talking a little bit about today, it's not unique to this project for us. This encompasses about 2/3 to 3/4 of all the projects that we do, where we are able to deliver front-to-end services or through fabrication. And you know, it's really intentionally done with the idea of changing the way that we deliver projects. And again, doesn't have to be just fast. And to be really clear, it does not have to be in a design-build scenario. We've done these projects under design-build formats. We've done them under non-design-build formats. Yes, there are things called contracts, and contracts are so much fun. But you know, really what I'll start out with by saying, while we acknowledge this, you remember for the rules you break. Now, do I have any attorneys in the room or any insurance professionals in the room? Because I'm going to make you feel really uncomfortable. And maybe the DPR people might feel uncomfortable when I talk this way. But what I will say is, you know, this is really what it comes down to. If we start with the premise, and again, I have strong opinions about this, and I'm stubborn, and I'm ready, we'll tussle on this if we need to. But if we truly want to transform the industry, it's not about technology. It never has been about technology. If we truly want to transform the industry, we need to change the way we think about projects being delivered. We need to change about how the information is created and utilized. And we need to actually do what's right for the project. What's the end result? The end result is that builders have better results. They have more predictable results. Designers have more time, have more creativity, more flexibility to do the right design for that project in that place at that time with the team that's building it. And owners get more reliability, price reliability, schedule reliability, all of the things that owners want, which is they want what they thought they bought when they want it. And they don't want all the noise. I mean, I'm looking at you because I know you're an owner. I mean, do you enjoy RFIs, change orders, and disputes? Yeah. I mean, do you enjoy any of them? No. So what's the goal? Not do things that make owners angry, because of course we all rely on owners to build projects. We're not out there building buildings for ourselves most of the time. So you remember, for the rules you break. I'll start with the premise by saying on this project, and this project for perspective, you know, it's over a $500 million project. So when I say it's pretty good size, it's definitely bigger than my house. I hope most of your houses. But it was an unholy schedule. You know, we were told to deliver this project. This project had to be delivered and done and ready to occupy in 14 months prior to design starting. So we said, well, that's impossible, right? Nobody can do these things. And we said, well, so what are we worried about? What's the problem with that premise that you can't do it? Well, a lot of it circles around contracts. A lot of it circles around who's going to take what risk, who's going to own what responsibility, who's going to own what data. And so to be clear, what we said is, and I say we at this time because we did partner with DPR here, is what we said was, give us all the control. Let us control everything. Let us control the design. Let us control the way we build it. And we're going to own the risk. I mean, GCs, and I'm looking at how many GCs we have here? Right. If there's a lawsuit on a project and you had nothing to do with it, are you going to get sued? Yes. I mean, all nods, right? You're going to get sued no matter what. So you own the risk no matter what. I know attorneys will tell you they can firewall it off, and insurance people will tell you to minimize your risk. But the fact is, you're getting sued no matter what happens, no matter who does it. The lawsuit's coming to you because you got a deep pocket and a big insurance policy. So if you presume that you own the risk, even if it's not contractual risk, what are you really taking on by saying, I'll just own the risk, period? I mean, yes, you're still subject to lawsuit. Yes, you're still subject to, you know, a dispute or a problem. But if you get control with that risk, does that position you better than you might be otherwise? Obviously, I'm making the case that it does. And that includes design. Because again, at the end of the day, design can be done 100 different ways. None of those ways are necessarily finding the best solution for everybody, I guess is what I would say. But I keep coming back to the solution is the one that gives the owner of the project they want the way the field needs to build it. You know, because it's not robotic. Buildings aren't built in a factory yet. The field matters. The field, in fact, matters more than most anything. So we're scared of risk because we've been trained to be scared of risk for the last 40 years. And we've been lectured by our insurance carriers. We've been lectured by our corporate attorneys. Minimize, 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 compartmentalize, put everything in its own bucket. You know, it's not a new concept not to, I mean, prior to the 1970s, it was pretty common for companies to take on the full risk of design and construction, and then it faded away. So what I'm suggesting is let's go back to the 1950s, the good ways, right? Not the bad ways. So what if we went to the people who make it happen? So when we started this project, it was a phone call. We have this opportunity to do this project. It's pretty insane, sounds impossible. Should we say yes? And you know, the immediate thought if you're a designer, and I know that we got some designers in the room, is, well, shit, I gotta move fast. Like, I gotta move really quick. I'm gonna make 100 decisions that I normally have months to make, I now have weeks to make. How do I do that? How do I make sure I still get to the right answer? We did not start with design. What we started with was phone calls and meetings with the people who would build the job. We had phone calls, meetings with the excavator. We met with the bar placers. We met with the concrete superintendents. We talked with multiple steel fabricators, and we have steel experts in the house. And we said, if you have to move fast, tell me about what makes it hard to move fast. It wasn't about, you know, what gives you the least amount of concrete or what has the lightest rebars. What are the things that allow you to move fast? And be detailed. And so we were in the weeds with them saying, well, if we did it this way, what does that do to you? Does that make it easier or does it make it harder? And so, you know, you start to discover a lot of things when you ask questions. I like to be curious. And you hear things like, well, we don't have to use formwork. Okay, well, we're gonna build concrete without formwork. That's fine. That's something to chew on. Well, we're gonna damage shit. What do we do if stuff gets damaged and the next shipment doesn't come in for another 7 weeks or another 2 weeks, or in this case, another 2 days? You can't lose 2 days when you only have 14 months. So a lot of this circled around this idea of what was truly painful for the field, what made a difference for them. And so things like all foundations being an exact dimension that matches a backhoe bucket. You know, how many different backhoe buckets do we need on site to be able to dig all the foundations? Can you do it with one? Can you do it with one size? How do you set in elevations? How do you make sure that all your elevations are consistent enough that it makes it easy just to establish everything, even if you have to add on top to get some of the, whatever, the details of construction? All of the foundations on this building, 100% have prefabricated, uniform, consistent modules that can all be swapped out with any other module in the building. If a piece gets run over by a truck, if a shipment is short, we're stockpiling the same standard pieces so that they can keep moving even if something happens and goes wrong. All of the steel on the project was set up deliberately so that it can be swapped out with any other comparable piece of steel anywhere on the job without impacting the schedule, because steel gets damaged, it gets missed in sequences, things like that. And so this mindset towards how do you make this, how do you really set it up so that the field has, I mean, here's what I can't do. We did not control the weather. I mean, totally wish we could, because when you're in the ground, in the mud, it's not fun. So we didn't control the weather. That was unfortunate. We also didn't control manpower availability. Fact is there were never going to be enough people to build this job. So you started saying, in that scenario, what do you do? Well, you set it up so that you have the minimum number of people necessary to build the job. You look into every single detail to say, what's the fastest way to meet the engineering requirements of this detail? And that's what you design around. So with that being said, we learned a lot. I mean, we learned an enormous amount from those teams. What is prefabricated? What can be modular? I know we alluded to, we mentioned modular in the title. What can be modular and what shouldn't be? In this case, modular was all the foundation reinforcing, steel is steel. All the walls on the building are modular sections. They're all deliberately designed intentionally to be able to just boop, wrap the building, and we're closed up and we can start filling the inside. Because, I mean, I love structure. We all can, I'm sure you've picked up on that by now. But the fact remains is we're the critical path to let everybody do the real work, to get in and fill this building with everything that needs to be done. It is a data center, by the way, if you haven't assumed that on your own, given the speed of it. But if any of you have done data centers, you know what the inside of these things look like. It's 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. And at the end of the day, it was how do we get our building up fast enough that those people have a prayer of hitting the schedule. So we learned a lot. We talked to the field. We learned a lot from them. And again, we do this with DPR on a regular basis, being part of the family of companies. But we also do this with our other outside clients because they're not DPR. They don't have the same capabilities. They don't have the same field crews. They don't self-perform the same trades. So it's important, and I think also to acknowledge that if you're a designer, and I know we have some again in here, you need to know your builder. And these scenarios where you don't know your builder and yet you're still supposed to deliver this optimized, magical design. I'm one of those people that believes that's a fantasy. I don't think you can do it. I don't think it's possible. I think you're always going to have to accept something that is not ideal and that is not the best it could be, because you design for the people that build it. So again, what if we truly took ownership of the complete design and didn't delegate a single thing to anybody else? If there are there any structurals in here? Is it just me? It's always just me. In the structural world, it's frustrating because if you're working in a traditional format, to get your fee to a competitive level, you got to delegate 7 different things that are all structural in nature. And then you got to spend time reviewing somebody else's work on the work that you delegated because nobody could afford to pay you up front. I mean, on some level, if we think rationally, that's an insane process. And it's been rationalized because, well, those specialists understand it better, they can deliver it more efficiently. None of that is actually true. What it is a rationalization to feed a design contracting process that is broken. We expect architectural firms to hire consultants, and then we expect those consultants to focus on things that don't add value for the architectural firm. The architectural firms are incentivized to get a competitive fee and get the minimum level of results that they need to not piss anyone off. When you start to tie the idea of the structural or any of the trades, engineering trades, to the performance of the building, the performance and meeting of expectations, well then either you have to give your architects the flexibility to hire someone based on what they'll do and the cost is what it is, or you have to understand that that model doesn't deliver those results consistently. So in this case, again, we owned everything. We owned every single piece of unistrut in the building. We owned every piece of miscellaneous metals. We owned all the connections in the structural steel. We owned all of the planning and sequencing of how it would work with fabrication. Not one single piece of engineering was delegated to anybody else. For us, it meant we have to have a very diverse workforce. We have to have people that understand everything from unistrut to structural steel to foundations to you name it. But if we're truly serious about delivering better results, that's what we have to do. I'm going to stop real quick and open it up for arguments or questions, because I do know what I'm suggesting is the whole system is kind of crappy and we should just break it and start over. And I'll preface before I open the questions up, we are spending a lot of time internally saying, if we really believe what we're saying, then we should also be spending time thinking about how do you write a contract that's not the standard form contracts, that allows us to do this intentionally, consistently, reliably, let owners sleep at night, let everybody sleep at night. How do we just stop accepting that the way it's been done is the only way it can be done, and that we're stuck with these incremental improvements, streamline design a little bit, streamline submittals. Those things are all great, but those are like 2 to 5% improvements. If we want more than a 2 to 5% improvement on a process, we've got to get serious that the system itself is the problem. And with that said, and I'm a bullheaded son of a bitch, I'd love to hear some feedback, some questions on that, and that'll show you some metrics on the project, and we can talk a little bit more in detail on that. Oh, I don't have a microphone. We should have made everyone sit in the first 3 rows so that everybody doesn't have to jog.
That's great. So a comment, get your thought. What we hear a lot is that you can move fast, break things when the customer needs that really expedited schedule, right? It's a complex thing, and so they'll give up a lot of control that they otherwise would not. They'll give you a lot of leeway, they'll let you own the whole thing, and then they might even accept higher cost because their real driver is, the speed which they get their building. So how much of that do you feel like was true of this project versus if you were to work with that same client again and it was a more realistic schedule, would they accept all of the same things that they accepted on this project now that they've seen, the incredible results?
Perfect question. And the answer is sort of twofold. Yes, I do think when speed is such a critical driver of success, people will, listen, because let me address what this is really circling around is discomfort and a lack of comfort. And that might be owner comfort, might be trade subcontractor comfort, whatever, but this is really about being uncomfortable. And so when we have an owner who is in a position of, I really need something fast and I don't know how to get there and I'm just gonna have to trust somebody to get me there, right? They will let you do different things. That's a good foot in the door, but what I can tell you is that we have success with people over and over again delivering this way on completely normal schedules, on completely boring projects. For the love of God, we're doing K-12 schools in California this way. If it doesn't get any more painful sounding and ordinary than that, I don't know what is. And so you're right that sometimes for an owner that's nervous, they have to be in that, they have to have their ass on the line to deliver a product, and then they're willing to take chances. But what I will say is this is true for projects on normal schedules. And sometimes, I'll come back to you, let me give you an example. We just had this conversation with a potential owner about this project where they don't have their tenant figured out yet, they don't really have an aggressive schedule, they don't want to commit a lot of money until they know they have a tenant, but they want to be able to deliver. They have an end date they have to hit because there's a site constraint that says if you're not done by this date, you got permit issues. And what really this concept turned into was, well, what we can do, we're not going to get you on that site earlier, but we're going to buy you more time to wait for that client to sign up a lease. So we're going to buy the design team more time to do a little more iteration by using this to compress the schedule for the contractor without putting the contractor into the position of having additional costs. And to be clear, when we did this project that I'm talking about, our costs were no greater than a normal project. We did not spend a single dollar that wouldn't have gotten spent on a slow project. You're still going to do your engineering, you're still going to detail steel, you're still going to detail rebar. All we did is move those around and change the dynamic of that workflow, but we did not add cost by doing so. And so to your point, contractor acceleration does cost money. Design acceleration doesn't necessarily always cost money. It just means you might have the money coming at a different time in the life cycle of the project. So, but to that point, we have had good success with people doing it once because they had to, and then do it again because they love it. Go ahead, you had a follow-up though.
Hate microphones. That was a great clarification, because there is a difference between design acceleration and construction acceleration, and so I'm sure they paid the nose on the construction side with 6 days, 7 day a week, you know, kind of work happening. I guess you mentioned K-12, and I think that's just such a perfect, because they, it's, we still work with contractors in the K-12 market that want you to fax them things. I mean, it's literally that unsophisticated. So, and customers are a little bit less sophisticated. So how does that go? Is that even a conversation, or is it just, here's how we're delivering the project? It's not even really a conversation with them.
My second favorite word, other than uncomfortable, is trust. And so you're right. You gotta have people you trust, who understand what we're doing. It is not negotiable, by the way. You either understand how to do it this way and we trust you to deliver, or you don't. And that sounds terrible. Yes, I know probably there's startups that want to get a foot in the door. But at the end of the day, if we're really serious about changing things, you have to work with people who believe in changing things, because it requires them to be out of their comfort zone. And they're taking risk. They're taking on, whether it's a subcontractor or whatever, they're taking on risk by every project they take. They have to believe that what we're doing is going to deliver value and benefit to them. And in a lot of cases, steel fabricators are a classic case. We're taking work away from them. And we're taking the detailing away from them, and we're expecting them to price a set of fabrication drawings instead of and not a set of design documents. The upside is they know exactly what they're bidding on, down to the bolt. The downside is when they're trying to get a change order, there's no smoke and mirrors. It's either real or it's not. There's nowhere to hide from it, because the data set that they base their price on is a fixed, really, when you're in a technical model, everything's in there. The damn welds are in there, for God's sake. So there's nowhere for them to hide so it does force them to change their business model and acknowledge their profit more sort of on a fixed scope, as opposed to thinking they're going to make it up on 4% change orders that they're going to make $1.30 on a dollar. So there's definitely some accommodations, and not everyone in the trade world has loved that they lose that influence, that control. But at the end of the day, work is work. And what steel fabricators, as an example, you know what they really like doing? Burning steel. So all we're doing is saying, let us take that off you. You were going to third-party detail it anyway. Let us take it off you. You can bid something that's real. You're not going to have to guess. And we're not going to hold you to some amorphous idea of what your scope was. Did that answer your question?
I have a question and I have a story. I'll start with the question so you can ponder it while I tell the story. So the question I have for you is, how much of what we're talking about here is within the DPR family? And I love the name of that. It's the first time I'm hearing that today. The DPR family of companies. And the reason I ask that question is, here comes the story. I had a chance to meet a general contracted CEO in Sydney, Australia by the name of Alison Myrams. She had the opportunity to lead a general contracting firm, and she knew she was near kind of, retirement. She was on the other side of the peak of the hill, and she asked herself the question of, if I'm going to take this job, what is the thing that I want to change in construction as my legacy when I leave this company? And she decided that she wanted to change the way that project teams collaborate. So her methodology there was, as a general contractor, she made a bright line rule. She would only work with owners who agreed to a 5-day work week, paid her supply chain, but she still kept her creditors' queue. So she always had that money just in case. She then partnered with the New South Wales Sydney government to actually follow their efforts to do a case study about it. And the reason she thought the case study was important is because when she decided to do this, every other leader in the industry told her she was nuts. I have since retold this story to people in industry, and grown men have told me, it will never work. Even though there is a New South Wales case study that speaks to it. Maybe not every project, maybe not every data center, but it has informed worked. Long story short, she ended up running the firm with that agreement, only partnering with owners, and a lot of them were federal government owners who agreed to those terms. And the one project in particular that she invited the New South Wales government to build a case study with her, they were able to meet the project on time, on budget, and she had $250 million left over in her creditor queue that she never touched. And her Deloitte consultant at that time said, "I've never seen this." And she said, "Guys, it's not rocket science, it's trust." Mm-hmm. The supply chain felt that they were cared about because I, as their contractor, said, "I am putting your pay ahead of all my risk, and I'm asking the owner to meet me there." That created such a culture that she actually was able to solve the labor shortage for her firm because rebound employees, people who had left the company, ended up coming back. And so her hypothesis was always, people know if you care about them or not. We keep waiting for these grand gestures of contractual changes to occur, when really within the leadership's hands, it is the ability to set lines and make determinations on rules of engagement. So I guess that comes back to you, in the DPR family, are you making this part of your rule of engagement as a way of either seeding the future of changing contracts, or are you not waiting for contracts to change in this broken system that you're talking about? You're just living it in the way that you do business.
It's a good question. As far as the situation you were talking about, obviously it was sort of unique to that situation, but it played out. But I'll say what I take away from that is, as soon as somebody says it's impossible, well, that just means it's an opportunity in my mind, and that's where I'm weird. But for 20 years, people have told me that delivering projects the way we're delivering was impossible. For 20 years, by the way, I'm only 3 years at DPR. So I've been in the industry 30 years. So the last 20, almost everybody has said, this can't be done, it'll never work, you're never gonna get past the contract issue or the liability risks, and you're never gonna get the trade community to get on board, right? It's never gonna happen. Here we are. So impossible just means it's harder and people don't want to do it. The contract thing is interesting because I do think, so a couple of things about DPR, about 2/3 of what we will do is with them, and about 1/3 of it is outside of DPR. But it's always with, the common thread, it's always with self-performing contractors, 100% of the time. Because they understand the field, they have the knowledge and the expertise of the field, and they value us delivering a product that serves the field, if that makes sense. And so from that standpoint, the contractual setups can vary a lot. You know, we've had ones where we have a split contract because we got to get around an AIA, so we design with the right hand, we do fab drawings with the left hand, and we act like they're two separate scopes, whereas internally for us, they're of course not two different scopes, they're the same scope, and we'll dish out some hours either way. You know, so we'll work around it because of some of those necessities, but I don't like it. You know, when we can unify a contract, deliver a full set of deliverables, that's our preference. But I will say, self-performing contractors matter. You know, in the case of this project, DPR self-performed concrete, light gauge, exterior walls. What else? Did I get them all? Is there anything else? Probably doors, frames, and hardware, some of the other miscellaneous stuff. But the fact is yeah, but having the self-perform piece is critical. And again, self-perform builders understand construction because they're out there in the trenches building it. And so my preference is to work with builders that operate that way. It's not that we wouldn't 100% consider it otherwise, but those people truly value what we do. Some metrics, just so you do see. And again, on this building, if you're a steel person, if you're not, probably doesn't matter, almost 4,000 tons of rebar, over 4,000 tons of steel, which that 4,000 is really about 3,000 of structural and 1,000 tons of unistrut, hilti strut, miscellaneous pieces. And that's normal for data centers. It's a lot. It's a lot of little secondary stuff, all of which was part of our work. 95% of all the reinforcing in this project was prefabricated cage. We bought them from InSteel, if anyone's familiar with them. I used to work for InSteel, so I knew exactly what they were capable of. So 95% of our reinforcement was prefabricated. 2 weeks from the start of design to a mill order, because that's what it would take to meet the schedule. 5 weeks until we were burning steel from the start of design. 24 weeks overall reduction from what the initial thoughts were it would take to get through all that, or what might be considered reasonably normal fast track. We cut a full 6 months off of what would be a fast moving project. And then some dates, you can see where all this stuff happened. And so my point with all this is a very real project. It is mostly up in the air and standing at this point and being filled with all the wires and pipes and shit that I don't understand that people put in buildings. But it's good stuff. I'm sure it's better than steel. If anyone, I'm gonna keep moving for that if you're okay. So all of this to be said, and then I'll open it up for final questions. This is what it's all about. Learn the rules. Know what you're doing well enough that you can break rules like an artist, and you make it look intentional and you make it work. That's what we're trying to do. We're not doing it just for the hell of it, just because I'm a disruptive human being, which I kind of am. But there's a purpose to this. And my vision when I came to DPR and for the last 20 years, I want to change the way the entire US construction industry looks at how we build and how we deliver projects. And I want us to get away from this broken, crappy, segmented mess that we are stuck with. Maybe I won't achieve that, but it's more fun than shooting for 3% improvement in gross margin, on an engineering firm, because making 10% on 1% of the project is a whole lot less fun than making 2 or 3% on the entire construction cost, because we did this better and still delivered an owner a project on schedule, at cost, at the quality level they want. I don't buy into that crap about scope, schedule, quality. You can have them all, but you got to break some rules. With that said, any questions? And I hope I'm not over time. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Hey, thanks. This was great. I met someone that works for you last week at the Mass Timber Conference, Eric Kinnear.
Oh, okay. Yep. He's got a lot of opinions too.
Yeah, he does. I had a good time with him, but I find it interesting, your kind of topic and assertions around what it means to change the industry and doing it incrementally versus kind of whole hog. And I come from a company that was trying to kind of completely change the game. Worked 5 years at Icon, who 3D prints homes. I'm not Swinnerton. I think I would, first of all, I would say that the industry probably needs both, right? Incremental change and wholesale change. And I'm getting to a question, I promise. And it's structural related, which is specifically what I want to ask you. But so I come from this additive manufacturing world, and I think that's generally speaking, how you make a wholesale change is by changing the material that you're working with or how you deliver that material, right? It's mostly a physical kind of physics problem, right? A lot of the technology that we see that makes incremental change is in the process, right? I think you can make a lot of incremental change by kind of changing softwares or improving your process or whatever. But when you talk about really changing timelines during the construction phase, it's a physics problem. And so as I'm really getting into the breadth of alternative technologies and approaches to construction, an obvious one is prefabrication and modular. The structural problem that I keep rubbing up against is modular represents a lot of inherent improvement, right? You can build in a controlled environment. You can run a lot of components in parallel and then deliver them at the same time and then install them. So there's a lot of benefits. But the structural problem is so often I see difficulties around designing a modular component for shipping, which necessitates much more restrictive design or expensive design. And so if you're creating a modular system that is going to bring down cost and time, but you have to create a system that is beefier because you're creating it for shipping and lifting, how do you square that circle? Or do you have any experience with that, or have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, so let me hit a couple quick points. Number one, by the way, incremental improvement is great. I don't mean to put it down, because we have to do that. We have to stay competitive. We have to take advantage of the incremental improvements, for sure. And yes, we have dealt with exactly the same issue. We've done everything from custom designed, fully prefabricated buildings to semi-custom designed electrical rooms and other products like that, to working with other people's modular designs, you know, like OES, which is another family of company, is doing these modular job trailers, and we've looked at the engineering of those, and you're right, the lifting, stability, bracing, all of those things necessary to do to be able to shift or ship modular components. That's far more significant than what they experience in real life. The short answer is I don't think it's an easy solution. You can mitigate some of it, like I think Atul mentioned about putting prefabrication closer to sites, getting a more distributed mini factory kind of a concept. I think that helps a little bit because you can start to control some of the dynamics of that shipping problem. But I don't think it goes away. I really don't. I think when done right, a modular approach can deliver a much better result and make up for those structural tweaks. Honestly, if the structural tweaks are done right, it's not a big cost factor. I mean, it's a very, very minor number in the scheme of that component. But you're right that it has to be thought through. It's usually just an interactive process of, hey, if we can do this, we can minimize that cascade of connections and load transfers and all that other shit. And then we can keep that cost down, and we just need the rest of the design team to work within that set of parameters. But we view it as make sure they have the right information. And then if we're gonna make a trade-off and make it less efficient to fabricate, lift, erect, et cetera, it's usually because we decided something else was worth more money. Does that answer it? Okay. Others? Come on, Koshal, I thought you were gonna come up with some heckling questions. I was ready for a fight. Nothing. Well, it's been great. I appreciate you guys not being asleep. It's fantastic this time of day.